Welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I am your host, Rashid Muhammad, and I thank you for joining me and joining us today on this powerful, impactful show. We're going to get to a few issues. I'm waiting for my co-host to come in. We're having a little technical difficulties as always when the show starts, but I'd like to thank all of you all for joining us today and those who will join us later. There's so many things that are going on in the news today, and you know we like to address everything. We like to give it uh, a good context because most people, when they're looking at things, they look from a blurred vision, blurred view, or a biased view. So we like to put things out and let you think about it because most people they don't think. That seems like a skill that has been lost in today's society. Thinking and analytical uh, study and analytical discourse. It seems like that's been lost. And there's an old saying is common sense is not so common anymore. And in today's society, we see a lot of that. I wanted to start off with the Rittenhouse uh, judgment, but I wanted to ask my co-host this, but he's not in at this moment. So what I'm going to do, instead of starting off with the Rittenhouse, as soon as he can get through, maybe he's being blocked, I don't know. But as soon as he can get through, we're going to discuss that just for a short period of time because I have a lot of people asking me to address that. But I want to get to a few things, okay? Very quickly, because we see a meltdown underway. We see a travesty of justice, and what is going on really is that the ex-slaves are vexing the ex-slave master. You see, and the more one reaches for justice and the more one denies the justice, there is a clash, right? There's a clash, a social clash, a racial clash, an ethical and a moral clash, a political clash that which leads to a great divide in society. But what's more is the whole world is watching, and the whole world is seeing injustice from the American political and judicial system and economic system all around the world. I don't think a lot of you understand this, but all around the world, people watch to see if America will live up to the standard that she holds others to. All around the world, people watch the so-called the exceptional nation, and they see that there are some exceptions in this nation. And the exceptions is that if you are black, brown, red, or yellow, there's a different standard, especially if you're a black. And I'm talking about a descendant of an ex-slave. Well, I think a lot of people don't like to touch on the issue of race because it offends a lot of people, and it may alienate people, viewers, subscribers. It may alienate people whom they trust as sources or contacts. But if you cannot deal with the issues that are at hand, and these issues, if you address them, will break up your alliances or your friendships, then they were never a part of your alliance or your friendship from the start. Okay. So the whole world, I was watching all the news around the world. I was watching news from Beijing, news from Russia, news from the Middle East, news from Africa and South and Central America. I was just looking at how the people reacted around the world. And this, it gets blocked out of the search engines in America. It gets blocked out of the mainstream media, and it gets blocked out of like alternative media, because I want you to remember that the most dominant sites in alternative media are right-wing sites, and even in the left-wing sites, there's little to no talk about it, or if they address the issue, they address it from a position of where they want to exploit the issue instead of getting to the core of the issue. Okay. And so what we'll do, we'll get to the very core of the issue. And the core of the issue is race. If you were a party, or if you watched the last show that we did a few days ago, the last live that we did a few days ago, we were talking about America's racism against China and the other non-Western or non-white nations. And I told you that America's international or global policies is a reflection of America's domestic policies. You see, and you can see the biasness, the double standards, the hypocrisy, the arrogance, the hubris in their policies towards Africa, and their policies towards South and Central America, and their policies towards China and the Asian Pacific, right? You can see that, and you can see their biasness and hypocrisy in the Middle Eastern area. That is only a microcosm of her biases and her policies in America proper, okay? People, it's no other way around to address this, okay? I can't play around with it. I can't ignore it for the sake of viewers, for the sake of sponsors, for the sake of friendships, for the sake of alliances. I have to get to the point. America is a racist nation. And what we see in the political system, in the judicial system, in the financial system, is anger from those who have benefited from this establishment. If you take what I'm saying and just give it just an ear, if you go and do your research and look at all of the websites from Russia Today, from Natural News, Blacklisted News, Steve Quayle, all of these other websites leading up to the verdict, they had already exonerated Mr. Rittenhouse. Now, I want to share something with you. Now, check this out. I'm a black man in America, a descendant from slavery. There is no way that I would be afforded the same luxury as Mr. Rittenhouse. A black man walking, listen to me good, because there were protests. And let us not forget, he said he went there to protect stores. Now, his parents allowed him to go there because, remember, he is a minor. It's late at night, and he chose to go there with an assault rifle. Okay, he chose to go there with an assault rifle. He did not address the issue. Neither did his parents address the issue of police infiltration of the protests. Nobody addressed that issue. No right wing, no left wing, none. Nobody is addressing that issue of the infiltration of the protesters with stooges or with covert police operations, because every time there's a protest that is demanding something that gets the ear of the nation, then you have infiltrators to make the majority of the people look as though that they were violent and just wanted to loot and riot. We had on one of our platforms, we had proof, we had pictures and video proof of trucks being brought to certain areas of protest. I'm not just talking about, I'm talking about around the country, full of bricks. And they were being handed out to protesters. And then you would see that, and listen, this is going to offend some people, but this is the truth. We have to address truth. We have to put this stuff out there, regardless to whom it offends. Or we have protesters. If you look at a lot of the video or the pictures, just Google this stuff of protesters breaking into stores and stuff. These protesters have hoodies on. They have masks on. They have gloves on. They have this stuff. These are the people who broke into the thing, and then they move out the way. And then the protesting crowd just goes in, and then for some strange reason, the cameraman suddenly appears and start filming it. These things are not done by accident. These are strategic things to vilify a certain class of people. Now, get into something. I want you to think about this. And I see Rashid is in the booth, and I'll bring him in just a second. But I want you to think about this. What if I said that on January 6th, that I wanted to prevent the protesters in Washington, D.C. from getting out of hand? And I would have gone there with an assault rifle, right? And I would have started firing on people that were breaking into the Congress. Do you for 1 minute believe that the police would not have shot me? Do you believe that I would not have been assaulted? So on one end, they want to paint him as this heroic patriot, but he went there with bad intentions. He went there with bad intentions. He didn't go there with a knife. He didn't go there with a baton. He went there with an assault rifle. The word assault in the name rifle, assault rifle. You understand? I'm telling you, I'm exasperated by this because the people who benefited from the system's racism, and listen, this is inherent. This is not something that somebody is just paranoid about. This is inherent. If you go on any block in any city in America and a black person is pulled over by the police, even if they have the license for the guns, they are immediately treated as suspects. I remember I was being pulled over, right? I was one day, and this is when I used to work for people. I was leaving work. I was tired. I had been there a shift and a half. I was exhausted, and I had been working like that all week or all for 2 weeks. And on my way home, I see a police officer. He looks and he pulls out and he follows me. I'm still going the same speed, same everything. I'm just going. And out of the blue, he just pulls me over, right? And then he asks me, he comes up to the car. Now, mind you, listen, he comes up to the car on one side, talking to me, right? And as I look around, as he's asking me for my ID and identification, when I said, listen, I always keep my wallet under my seat. I said, I want you to look while I'm doing it. I'm gonna keep one hand on the steering wheel and I'm gonna look up under the seat. This was years ago. And as I leaned over like this to reach, I looked out the passenger side window and there was a police officer already on this side of the door with his gun drawn. Now I'm leaving work and they're asking me where I'm coming from. And I told them that was none of their business. I said, because I said, I've been past the legal age of 18 for many years, but I was leaving work. I said, do you not see me? Because they asked me to get out the car. I said, do you not see me dirty? Just left work. Do you have anybody to vouch for that? I said, vouch for it? How about you call the place that I just left? And they'll tell you I just left. So it was a big brouhaha. These guys, and it was burning hot out there. These guys told me to lay across the back of my car, the trunk part, and it was scorching out there. Now I said, listen, man, I can't do that. I said, this thing is piping hot. I tell you what I'll do. I'll go up against the fence over here, and I'll stand up and with my back to you and my hands up against the fence because that is absolutely scorching. And he was like, no, but so I had the bottle of water. I poured on it, and he could see the steam coming off. It was a blazer out there. I said, listen, man. And it just so happened that my cousin was a police officer. One of my cousins was a police officer, and he was in the area, and he pulled up. And I won't say too many things about him, but anyway, he verified who I was and where I was coming from. They still did not want me to leave the position, and they had guns drawn on me. You see, I'm not afforded the luxury that the Rittenhouse guys afforded. Most Black people in America are not afforded that luxury. And if we are coming to a protest, look at the outrage. I want you to understand something. Do a Google search. I often say this to you. before they wipe the stuff out of Google. I often say this to you. Do a Google search of this. When Black Panthers or when the black militias were protesting, or they came after the violence that they saw taking place against black protesters across America, when they took up arms, and I'm not saying take up arms, I'm telling you not to take up arms, okay? But I'm just giving you an incident, multiple incidents that took place. When they took up arms to protect protesters and to walk alongside protesters when they got word that right-wing armed groups would be there in the same capacity that Rittenhouse was. Do you know that it made all of the mainstream media and all of the alternative media, and they were they like classified these people as extremists, black extreme militants, black people who wanted to overthrow the government and all of this stuff. But Rittenhouse comes there with an assault rifle, okay? Assault rifle. Let's get that right. I'm going to remind you, assault rifle. All right. And he is put on a pedestal by the mainstream and the Western media. Now, black people knew that this, they might not want to acknowledge this, but they knew that this would be the outcome of the trial. This is why they already had prepared to protest, because they had faced this so many times. Now, when white America thought O.J. Simpson murdered his wife, ex-wife, and Ron Brown or whatever his name was, they were outraged. Not only were they outraged, but they demanded that since the system had broken down, we need some action. So not only did they try O.J. Simpson in a criminal court, they took him to a civil court after, when the verdict was not to their liking. They took him and sued him and tried to take all of his finances. Right? I'm asking you to just pay attention to this, because there's so many double standards in America, especially when it comes to black people. And even there's another double standard when it comes to black Africans from our motherland, and black people who were born under slavery or down from slavery in America. Because those who are descendants of slavery are at the bottom. Anybody from any country can come here and get aid. Anybody can come here and get help outside of people who were descendants of slaves. Okay, this is something that is not talked about in the media. Rashid, I'll bring you in just a second. I just need to say a few things here. So when they thought O.J. Simpson murdered his wife, it was outrage, and they still won't let that go. They still won't let it go, and they set him up on another matter to put him in prison, because they were still outraged at the verdict. But if you get outraged, right, and you send people out to protest, which I highly advise not to do, but if you send people out there to protest, then you will most likely be met with people like Rittenhouse. And they often talk about the Second Amendment or the right to bear arms when it concerns white Americans. And they can justify it on every level. But they will come up with every excuse why the police stopped you, why the police shot you, why the police held you up and frisked you if you had a gun, or if they thought or suspected you had a gun. Do you not see that that's in the mental psyche of America? The hypocrisy, the double standards, the exceptionalism, the white privilege. This is everywhere, and I have to talk about it. I cannot mince words. I have to tell you the truth. Now, as I said, let me bring Rashid in and let him, maybe he want to say a few things on this. How you doing? Walaikum salam. How's it going today?
It's doing just fine. I'm going to take the opposite view. This is the reason why we need separation. This is Elijah Muhammad's view. Separation solves the problem. If
Right.
two people cannot get along together, right?
Right.
Justice dictates a separation. Now, if the white man is sitting up here riding around with a high-powered rifle, shooting everybody, why would you get upset? Because that's his nature. You talking about exceptionalism, his double standard? Don't he do that to everybody around the world?
That's what I said. That's what I
That's
said.
like you said, that's in his DNA. You cannot get upset with a man who's telling you 365 days, 23 hours, 46 minutes, and 56 seconds a day that I hate your guts, that I want to kill you. You can't get upset with that. That's the man's nature. He come from Europe. And remember, other than what a lot of these people run around here saying about the founding fathers, they were the lower class people of Europe. Not
That's
the
right.
upper class, the lower class people of Europe. The cutthroat, the highwayman, the pedophile, the murderer, the scum of Europe came and populated America. And as you was hundreds of years ago, so is their descendants are today. They are the same people. Giving justice to black people is something he cannot do. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us, if you can't get her, if two people, the solution to the problem is to separate me. If I'm somewhere in my own country or somewhere governing myself, then there'd be no need to ride around with a high-powered rifle to shoot me or the police to come around there. See, this is what the black man cannot see. You are never going to get along with white people. They're showing you, since he didn't come out of Europe with flowers, did he? In a love fest. He came out of Europe murdering off people, the Aboriginal people of the land, stealing their land. Isn't that what he done? So why in the world, like you said, the people hundreds of years ago set up the white man for the day? If their fathers hadn't have done that, where would he be at? He'd still be back in Europe. The Indians would have this country, right? And he's not going to do something like that. So what do they say? You are who you, what they got a saying going around now among black people. You are who you say you are, right? Well, if the man is who he said he is, why get upset?
Right. And
you need him. You need to separate yourself from him and take everything that goes along with him, his religion, his way of life, his way of thinking, and flush it down the commode.
I think a major part of what is wrong with Black America is they believe that if they become a part of the political system, that they can change the system from within, and they don't understand that the system is inherently, to its core, to its DNA, based against you, built upon your suffering and exploitation, and that there's no saying. Listen, most people, even the white scholars or the right-wing media, understands today that America is Babylon, right? And they understand that America fits some of the
Babylon the Great.
prophetic. That's right.
Remember,
and
Babylon the Great. The two different Babylon.
Yeah.
Babylon the Great is of Scripture, of the Book of Revelation.
Yes. And so listen, as I was saying, and so a lot of them equate America to ancient Egypt, which is a true equation. But I tell the people to look at this. If you are a Bible thumper and you know your Bible, okay, in the Bible, under Egypt's reign under Pharaoh, God or Jehovah told Moses to go talk to his people, right? And he told them to do not integrate into that society, because integration brings about assimilation. And because I am going to destroy Pharaoh in Egypt, I don't want them a part of the political system, right? And so our people think that if we can just get if we are just a mayor, or we're just a comptroller, or if we are just a governor or lieutenant governor, or if we can become the president, we can change the system. Well, I say to you this: Barack Obama held the so-called highest office in the land. How is it working out for you today? How is it? Kamala Harris is supposed to be the second in charge of the country. How is that working out for you today? The political system is corrupt to the core. You know, as I'm talking about this, I was listening to a video, interview by Max Kaiser, right? And he was talking about the corruption, the inherent corruption of the financial system, and it trickles all the way down to the mayors and all of this stuff. And he was talking about that America only addresses issues like race and stuff, and I'm putting it out there, only when it cannot, it cannot be changed. I want you to listen to this. I'm going to go to this because he's talking about, which is a good segue, because he's talking about finance, the corruption of the system, the arrogance of these people, and then he goes in and he talks about racism and stuff like, and he makes some very fine points here. I wasn't going to play this yet, but I am going to play it, and I had to cut it into 2 clips because StreamYard would not allow you to have clips that are so long. So I had to cut it into 2 clips. But I want you to listen to Max Kaiser as he talks about the global situation, and he talks about how the world is not in debt to the tune of a few trillions of dollars, but to the tune of quadrillions of dollars. Quadrillions. And and after he and Stacy, his co-host, goes in, they then address issue of race real quickly. So I want you to be patient with it and listen to this.
Hi, I'm Max Kaiser. This is the Kaiser Report. Well, there's an Overton window somewhere, and we're going to throw the dollar out of it. How about that, Stacy?
Yes, well, you know, here on Kaiser Report, we've basically been covering the story for over a decade of the Overton window shifting, first in terms of how much deficit was allowed. Back after the 2008-2009 financial crisis, we were shocked to see when the deficit first hit $1 trillion. Remember that? The first ever $1 trillion deficit. Now it's like $3 trillion. And, you know, the shifting of what is accepted within the population and policy. So we're now allowed to have $3 trillion deficits because the Overton window shifted to allow for these sort of ideas to happen. So here we have something that happened up at COP26 in the past week, and that was Janet Yellen, our Treasury Secretary of the United States. She, of course, had been previously the chairwoman of the Federal Reserve. She said, Janet Yellen admits the net zero grand reset price tag will be $150 trillion, which was how Zero Hedge tweeted about it. They covered it. The exact quote Janet Yellen said was, quote, "It's a global transition for which we have an estimated price tag. Some have put the global figure between 100 and 150 trillion over the next 3 decades. Zero Hedge then a few days later, Max, they quoted, they have a piece from Eric Peters, who is a CIO of One River Asset Management. He's a hedge fund manager. So hedge fund CIO, once you say $150 trillion a few times, it honestly doesn't seem so big. So she had first said, her statement said 100 to 150 trillion. Her following paragraph, this is how you shift the Overton window. These programs are exciting, she said, but as big as the public sector effort is across all our countries, the $100 trillion plus price tag to address climate change globally is far bigger. And you see the cost already appeared rather smaller. So first she said 100 and 150 trillion, then the next sentence, the next paragraph, she shifted to 100 trillion plus. So this is how you train the Overton window. This is how you shift it to where you want it to go.
Right. Well, I mean, the numbers make sense because remember, 5 or 6 years ago, there was a G20 meeting where it was speculated that the cost of rolling up all the central bank bad debt to the IMF would be about 100 trillion. And the leader of Russia at the time was making that statement publicly, and they were talking about the need for a $100 trillion credit facility. Okay, let me continue. So because people now know that central banks' money printing is causing inflation, they needed to come up with a narrative to get people more scared. So they're just saying, this isn't a bailout, this is about climate change. But the numbers are the same. We always knew that they needed 150 trillion to bail out the central banks. They're calling it climate change. Okay, we call it the Overton window, or you can call it marketing. This is just marketing.
So yeah, that $100 trillion number we did discuss here on Kai's report. It was announced, of course, at the same place where the Great Reset is, and that is at the Davos Forum in 2011. It was by Davos man. It wasn't by the Russian leader, but it was Davos man, and we covered it. You could just Google it, $100 trillion credit facility needed to bail out the globe. And of course, we got there pretty fast, but that's where they floated the idea. That's where they shifted the Overton window, is that if you give the bankers $100 trillion, they'll bail out and rescue the system, and your house prices will go up again. Everything will go up in price again.
Right. So the numbers add up. It's $100 trillion. We know that that's what they needed to bail out the central banks who bailed out Wall Street and the banks in 2008. They need another bailout in 2021. It's about $100 trillion, $150 trillion they need in bailout money. They need all the central banks to print all this money. They need to increase inflation rapidly, but they can't call it that because people are now starving to death. So they're going to call it climate change, and we're worried about climate change. But that's nothing to do with it. It's about just another bailout for banks, again.
So I stopped it right there because I forgot to put the clip in. It's going to go a little bit further, but I got to put the disclaimer in so you don't get in trouble by YouTube. So let me put that disclaimer in real quick. Okay, now that we have the disclaimer in, I'll finish playing this the second part of it.
Nothing to do with it. It's about just another bailout for banks, again.
Exactly. And shifting that Overton window, the guy, this CIO of a hedge fund, goes on to say, that's how the Overton window works, because 100 trillion plus somehow feels quite a bit less than 150 trillion. And once you say $150 trillion a few times, it honestly doesn't seem so big. After all, when you think about it, the cost is spread over about 3 decades, which leaves it just 5 trillion per year. And that number used to feel utterly out of reach until 2009, when the global financial crisis sparked the first $3 trillion US federal government budget. So there's the shifting Overton window, and we'll have to get up to a quadrillion, by the way, because that's the size of the derivatives bubble. And that's where we have to go. So they're shifting us up there. By the time we get there, of course, what's the number after quadrillion? That's where bankers will be.
Yeah, of course, because the globe's in a hyperinflationary collapse against Bitcoin, and that applies to all fiat money, including the dollar. And they need to go exponential, continue to be exponential in the money printing. And the story to me is that they're hiding behind the climate change. When climate change became incredibly beyond the reach of fixing, they felt comfortable talking about it in terms of Fed policy. Just like the white population in America feels comfortable with talking about Black Lives Matter now because it's beyond the point of fixing. They're concerned about the Native American Indians because it's beyond the point of fixing. They're concerned about climate change because it's beyond the point of fixing. I mean, this is a standard trope of charlatans and crooks. And they just need another $100 trillion because they're drug-addled, desperate, disgusting people, and they need for middle-class taxpayers to pony it up. So they're going to scare everybody beyond the point where it can be fixed. We're beyond the point of fixing climate change because of the money printing. So they don't want to say, we're printing money and you're dead. They want to say, give us more money. It's so shameless. It's shocking.
So his point was that the situation between white America and black America is beyond the point of fixing. Just like climate change is beyond the point of America to do anything, or the globe can do anything. The point, he said, we're beyond the point of white and indigenous people rectifying the wrong that had been done to them, right? Let's say you on this as we transition, because he connected that with economics. Let's say you about this, Rashid, real quick before we go transition to the economics and the geopolitical part.
That's his nature. He can't help himself. Doing evil, murder, rape, robbery. You cannot change a man's nature. The black man been trying to do this civil rights facade since the 50s. Has anything ever changed? Like you said about O.J. Simpson, even when he got acquitted, and the people were following him, they he stayed out in the hills over here.
Mm-hmm.
He got stopped over in Griffith Park. That's the Mohills over there, right? And he said people were following him, and the first thing the police did was come and put handcuffs on him. It's systemic. They can't change themselves. You make a fool out of yourself when you thinking that they're going to change and we're going to have this big love fest and we're going to be all kumbaya together. He cannot help himself. He has to do this. It's in his DNA. And the proof of it is, since he come out of Europe, he's been doing the same thing.
So, which is good. And as we transition to the geopolitical and the economic part, it still has the climate of race over it. As we were talking about on our last show, and we showed you that in America's foreign policy, there's a lot of racism and arrogance in it, just like it is in her domestic policy. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to continue to say this, that America's global or international or foreign policy is a microcosm or a reflection of her domestic policies. And I have proof, more proof, and more proof. But we were telling you the reason China became a member of the United Nations Security Council. We were telling you that on the last show. We were telling you about the racism that is fundamentally at the core of America preoccupation right now with China and how her number one enemy was Russia for so long, and now that China's rising, she went and said, no, Russia's no longer our number one enemy. China is the greatest threat to American interests. Interest means domination, her power, what she wants to put on you. That is what it is in a nutshell. How can I say my interests? I have to go to Rashid's house and make sure whether he opens the door or not, I have to get in there and make sure my interests are taken care of. You see, Rashid lives 2,000 miles away from me, right? You would look at me as though I was crazy, but this is what America does. Her interests in Asia, her interests in Africa, her interests in the Middle East, her interests in South and Central America. That's double speak for her domination. And to making her policies law. And if you don't believe what I'm saying, just look at when she disagrees with somebody or when she gets mad with somebody. The first thing she does, she uses her dollar weapon or her sanctions weapon to try to put inflation over the people or try to destroy the economies of other nations, so that because the people that she wanted to be in power were not in power, she tries now to destabilize the nation so that it can be protests for lack of food and for higher prices, because this is what sanctions do. And this is what the banning of other nations from using a dollar does to what used to do to people. And this would cause riots and uprisings and coups because people want a normal life. Okay. But this goes to a point. I interviewed Mr. Dennis, the late Professor Dennis Etler, on multiple occasions. As a matter of fact, I believe, the last two interviews with Dennis Etler by any interviewer on the globe. I mean, in the globe, around the world. I have the last two interviews, and they're on the Patreon. And we were supposed to interview twice the week that he passed away. As a matter of fact, a few days after he passed away was the day settled for two interviews. We were going to do one for YouTube and one for Patreon. But he and I discussed what America calls the rules-based order and its inherent racism, okay? And this is a scholar. He was a world-renowned scholar. And I want you to hear, as I lay out a case to him, I want you to hear his reply to this case, especially when it's regarding non-white nations or a nation like China. So I want you to pay close attention to this, okay? Now, I want to play something for you, and I'm going to do it off my phone because I notice whenever I play a clip on StreamYard or YouTube, the volume is so low, and I don't know why they do that because it's not just my show that does that. It's on multiple shows. So I want you to hear something. This is from Press TV. Let me put it to this. This is from Press TV.
Sure.
And I'm going to play something. It's about 1 minute and 21 seconds. And I want you to listen to Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, or what he has to say. And before I play it, I like to inform people that when you hear Joe Biden or Donald Trump, or you hear Stoltenberg, or you hear Macron, or any of these people talk about a rules-based order, they're not talking about an international order with rules for everyone that the same rules. They're talking about a rules-based order where the Western world dominates and the Western world dictates what everybody else should do. So everyone who will be listening to this should understand that. As when we play this later, when this interview goes live later, I want people to understand that the rules-based order is not an order, international order of everybody plays by the same rules. It is a order where the Western world, that is NATO, Europe, and America, dictates to everyone else, and everyone else plays by the rules that are given to them by the West. Would you agree with that?
Oh, of course, absolutely.
Okay. Now I'm going to play this minute and 21 seconds, and after that, I want to pick your brain on what you hear in this. To me, it was a desperate plea or a desperate call to try to save a declining order. So I just want you to hear this. Here we are. It's getting. Hold on one second. Hold on. Here we are. Hold on one second. All right, there we are.
China and Russia are trying to rewrite the rules of the road to benefit their own interests. The rise of China is a defining issue for the transatlantic community, with potential consequences for our security, our prosperity, and our way of life. This is why NATO should deepen our relationships with close partners like Australia and Japan, and forge new ones around the world. Your vision for the future. Defending our rules-based orders starts by defending our values at home. We must recommit to our values, strengthen our democracies, and protect our institutions. Because ultimately, this is what makes us who we are. We also need to invest to maintain our technological edge. We now have an historic opportunity to build a stronger alliance, to regain trust, and to reinforce our unity. Europe and North America working together in NATO, in strategic solidarity. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General.
Now, he talked about China and Russia being a growing threat to the international rules-based quote-unquote order, and how he didn't say South America, he didn't say Central America, he didn't say the Caribbean, he didn't say Africa, he didn't say Asia. He said Europe and North America working together to enforce whatever quote unquote their culture or whatever. I'm paraphrasing now. Their culture, their institutions. Isn't that racist in itself? I mean most people don't get that. Isn't that racist in itself?
All it is reframing They're, colonial policies of the past. You can't come out and use the racist rhetoric of the 19th century any longer. I mean, that's passe. You got to sugarcoat it. You got to obfuscate it. But that same rules-based order is the rules-based order of European colonialism and American imperialism. That's all it is.
So, Mr. Etler, he got the point, and he understood what Jen Stoneberg was saying as he was talking about China has become a threat. And he even talked about that it is imperative that the Western world, listen, America and Europe, maintain its technological edge, its military edge, its economic edge. Therefore, we must work with people like Japan and Australia to, in words, prevent China's breakout capacity. That's racist as hell. What say you, Rashid, about that?
Of course it is. That's his nature. You don't get upset for a man telling you who he is. Like Elijah Muhammad teaches us. He was riding the horse of leadership of the planet. And now he sees other people trying to take him off that horse. And he's getting very angry. He's not going to go out willingly. The Western mindset is, if I cannot rule, I'll destroy everybody. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going on. He sees his power being interfered with. He wants to stop the rise of China because the center of the world will go from west to east.
That's right.
And he can't dictate any terms to the east. The east will eventually, no matter what he do, overcome him. They're doing it now.
Yeah.
Once they overcome them, then you got to go by another man's rules. China does not go to a different continent and rape and rob and pillage and steal all of their resources and bring them back to him. He talk about China and Africa, but I haven't seen the Chinese go nowhere and rape, rob, and pillage and steal and enslave. That's his game, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So what it is he's fearful. He sees he's losing. And he's lashing out at all of the countries around the world because once he loses his crown, he's done for. Europe has no natural resources, basically. And if he can't come over there and steal from you and enslave you, then what is he? He's not a rich country. He's a poor country. Very poor. Right?
Yeah. Right. And so there was an interview later on, recently by Jen Stoltenberg, where he was trying to dictate. And when I say Jen Stoltenberg, for those of you who are listening, he is the so-called Secretary General of the North Atlantic Terrorist Organization called NATO. And he was trying to dictate terms to China. China must do this. China has to do this. We demand that China do this. And then the Chinese looked at it was amazing because the Chinese were so cool with it. They looked after they heard the statement by him, they addressed it. And you know how the Chinese are, they're very very calm when they address things. And he was like, man, we're not even thinking about you. Well, you know what I mean? You can't, in words, they'll say, you no longer have the edge. You can't tell us what to do. You know, we bided our time. Now we're in a position of strength. You can't dictate to us from a position of power. Either you deal with us as equals or don't deal with us at all. And so this short clip here is from an ambassador of China, and it's maybe about 30 seconds or whatever. But it's from the ambassador of China, and he pretty much, and you have to listen closely to it because it's some broken English. But he pretty much puts America on blast. But before I play that clip, again, I have to at least play this exclaimer at least twice during the show so that YouTube does not give us strikes or ban us, okay? So listen. Okay, now listen to this.
The U.S. says that its China policy is for defending the rules-based international order and ensuring the implementation of rules of the road. But what are the rules? What made these rules? Who made these rules? Now, who are the traffic police? The U.S. has not made itself clear on these questions.
Stop right there. And then I'll play it. It's only about a minute or 30 seconds, but he has been interviewed or questioned by the media, and somebody poses something about the international order or the rules-based order, and he says, well, tell us what is the rules-based order and who made these rules that the world is supposed to base their opinion off of. And then he said, in so many words, he's calling out Russian and not Russian, but U.S. and NATO arrogance and so-called exceptionalism. You have to listen closely to what he's saying. So I'll play this again for you to pay close.
The U.S. says that its China policy is for defending the rules-based international order and ensuring the implementation of rules of the road. But what are the rules? What made these rules? Who made these rules? Now, who are the traffic police? The U.S. has not made itself clear on these questions. In our view, there is only one international system in the world, namely the international system with the United Nations at its core. There is only one international order, which is the one underpinned by international law. And there's only one set of rules, namely the basic norms governing international relations based on the purposes and the principles of the UN Charter. International affairs should be addressed through consultation, and the genuine multilateralism must be practiced.
So you know what he was saying in words? He was saying, don't come talking to us about rules-based orders from your perspective. Don't come talking to us about what we should do and what we must do. Don't start talking down to us because we having none of it. We're having none of it. And we're not going to proceed by your dictates. We're not going to proceed by your directives. We're not going to proceed by your laws or what you deem is right. We're not going to honor your sanctions. We're not going to do this that you demand. We are going to walk the path that was agreed upon. And if you don't like it, tough luck. That's what he's saying. The Chinese are so calm and smooth when they do it that sometimes most people overlook this. But again, all of this, the racism in America domestically and the racism in America's foreign policy is actually helping to bring down the empire because nations are seeing the double standards. While she demands human rights for other nations, America makes up 5% of the global population of the planet Earth, yet she has 25% of the prison population of the planet Earth, with 75 to 90% of that being Black and brown people. If that's not a human rights violation, you tell me what that is. If that's not a racist and inherent racist system, you tell me what it is. Don't look into my house. Don't look at the dirty laundry in my washroom. I'm just telling you, in your house, you got to get all that laundry washed. And if you don't get the laundry washed, then we won't sell you no more dollars. We won't give you any more dollars. The arrogance of this stuff. And people, it seems like you can't comprehend it. Don't you understand that this is what is causing the fall of America? The double standards, the arrogance, the hubris. I want you to, let me give you an example, because I'm the king of analogies. Okay. Say, for instance, and Brother Rashid was knocked off. Hopefully he'll get back on. But say, for instance, Rashid is lending me money to sustain my household. Rashid is giving me a credit line to pay my bills. Rashid is manufacturing the stuff that I'm buying, right? Now, so that means that my livelihood and my family's livelihood and the state of my family and the security of my family lies with Rashid. Is that not right? But I'm demanding that Rashid do this, this, and this. And then I'm coming to Rashid's door with a pistol saying that if you don't do this, I'm going to kill your children. And do you expect Rashid to continue funding my livelihood? Do you expect that Rashid continues to look out for the security of my family and my household? Because if he did that, he would be insane. But this is what America is doing. She borrows from these nations, then she puts her military in their waterways, near their air, near their sea, and their land borders. And then she demands them to follow her rules, or else we will use the military. Well, that is no longer a threat to China, because China, listen to me good, China, when America, not if, I don't care what the pundits say, I don't care what the geostrategists say, I don't care what the analysts and the pundits say, China and America will go to war. They are going to go to war, because America is a descending power. And China is ascending. And America has shown that she would not willingly give way to a new power. As a matter of fact, her doctrine, her stated doctrine, right, is MAD, M-A-D, right? That's a hell of a policy, right? Think about that for 1 second. Her national security doctrine is based off what she terms MAD, M-A-D. That's the acronym for mutually assured destruction, meaning that they try to tell you, well, we'll build up all of these weapons, and if someone strikes us, we'll strike them, and everybody will be destroyed. But that's not truly why she has built up these weapons, because remember, she does not have weapons that are capable of destroying the world one time. She has enough weapons, she says, to destroy the world 30 times over. Well, why would you even fathom that? Unless you are like in fantasy land, or dislodged from the truth, or dislodged from your senses. So if you have built up enough armaments and weapons to destroy the world 30 times over, this is not about a mutually assured destruction. This is about destroying anybody that you and your nations, your lackeys, or your minions, or your so-called allies deem as a threat. This is what this is about. And it's racist as hell, because most of you don't know that Canada, Belgium, Germany, Italy, France, the UK, and all of the surrounding nations in Europe have now deployed more troops to North Africa in different capacities. Listen, this is how they get you where you don't understand what they're doing. We know that these are member states of NATO, right? And we know that these countries had what they deemed spheres of influence in colonial Africa, right? Well, what they have done now is demanded military bases or sanctions, and these nations are now reinforcing their military bases across Africa, right? But they're doing it in the media as individual nations. But these individual nations are still in their so-called spheres of influence. So what this is a mad scramble to suppress the rise of Africa. That is why they sanctioned Zimbabwe. See, they don't tell you the truth about that either. Let me get to that, because this all goes to American geopolitics, Europe's geopolitics, their economics, and their racism, okay? Because you don't get this really when you look at alternative media. You don't get this really when you're talking about mainstream media. They sanctioned Zimbabwe under Robert Mugabe, right? They promised his number 2 man, because he had been waiting so long to take the reins of power. They promised him that if he came to power, and the top generals, if they came to power and overthrew Mugabe, that they would relieve the sanctions on Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe would be able to flourish. And this is why that coup took place in Zimbabwe. But prior to that, let me give you some, because a lot of times when we talk about inflations, when you look at alternative media like the Economic Collapse blog, Zero Hedge, and all of them, and they talk about Zimbabwe hyperinflation, and they talk about how Robert Mugabe ran Zimbabwe in the ground. They don't tell you the truth of it. They targeted Robert Mugabe, and each time they tried to overthrow him through a coup, like I cannot get that guy's name, who was the prime minister, who tried to overthrow him, and Mugabe and them had him on tape in Britain, working out a scheme with the UK and the US to try to overthrow Mugabe, right, and his government, so that Western corporations could get their feet back into Zimbabwe, because it's rich in all kind of minerals. I mean, it is absolutely loaded. But my point is this: they sanctioned Mugabe, and I want you to do some research, and maybe you might have to go on another engine, because I know Google sanctions a lot of stuff, and they censor a lot of stuff. But again, at one time, Britain and the US recognized Mugabe, and they were talking about this great warrior, Robert Mugabe. You can go Google this. And as Robert Mugabe started to institute policies that would return stolen land, stolen farmland, right, to the people of Zimbabwe, which was under colonial rule, it was called Rhodesia. But as he started to demand that white population, which only makes up 3 to 5% of Zimbabwe, return the fertile land which white Zimbabwe, even though they only made comprised up 5% of the population, owned 95% of all of the fertile land. And as Robert Mugabe tries to institute policies that would correct that colonial wrong, Britain and America sanctioned the Zimbabwe economy to destroy, and then they destroyed the Zimbabwean dollar. If you don't believe me, go research it. And this is what caused the collapse of the Zimbabwe currency. And they did it, and they have not let up yet. They have not let up yet. Okay? Whenever the US or Britain don't get their way, they resort to, first of all, they vilify, they demonize, they sanction, they try coups, and if that doesn't work, then they go into a overt military operation, and they use all of the Western instruments of propaganda to justify it. And then they know a few years later, when so-called no WMDs like in Iraq were not found, they don't have to pay the price. They don't have to go before the International Criminal Court. Those institutions are set up to try indigenous people or lower rung European people. That's what those are for. Those are illegitimate levels of international power. Okay? But I'm giving you the facts. So this policy, this racist policy to dominate everything, to extract wealth, because as Rashid said, and I'm going to bring him back in because I see him up there, Europe has little to no resources. Little to no resources. This is for real. This is why they wanted to incorporate Ukraine into Europe, because Ukraine was at one time the breadbasket of Europe. They had huge coal mines, and they had untapped resources in the Black Sea, and they produced a huge amount of food. This is no longer the case. This is no longer the case. So after Russia took Crimea, those fertile and rich waterways became Russian territory again, right? The coal areas, which is the Donbass region, which is under an independent control of rebels, the Western nations didn't get their hands on it. That's why they're constantly bombarding that area today to try to retake that area so that they can get their hands on the coal and also the fertile farmland, which has not been cultivated anymore due to the extreme measures of the civil insurrection and war that is taking place and instituted and instigated by America and the Western world. Okay, so they have little to no resources, and so they go around the world and strike deals because of their military prowess. You're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do this, and we'll do this for you. And if you don't do this, we will do X, Y, and Z to you. There's a good book for you to read called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This guy, he goes into depths on how America does things. They try to bribe the leaders. If they can't bribe the leaders, they threaten the leaders. If they can't threaten the leaders, then they try to pull off a coup. If they can't pull off a coup, they send in the jackals for the assassinations. If they can't do that, then the military power is brought to bear against independent nations. This took place all over South and Central America. This took place all over the African continent. This has taken place all over the Asian continent by Western powers to try to maintain their grip on power. As Rashid says, Europe has little to no resources, So they use Africa and Africa's enormous and unlimited untapped resources as a mammary gland. And they suck the nourishment out of Africa. And the only way that they're able to do this is by causing disease to spread. I bet you didn't know that the United States, Europe have all kind of biolabs all across Africa. So when these diseases pop up, that's because they are exploiting and experimenting on the people. All right. They sanction certain nations so that they can't get an economic footing. Then they make up terror organizations like Boko Haram, or whatever it is, like an offshoot of Al Qaeda, which we all know is an American tool. Which we all know ISIS is an American tool. This is common knowledge, right? This is what they use so that they can justify. And in the Western world, you can't blame them, as Rashid said, because they got a good gimmick going on. They have a real good gimmick. I want you to think about this. Europe has little to no resources, but in the international sphere, America and Europe are considered first world nations, developed nations, rich nations. But mostly all they produce is currency. And they have this scheme where they go cut down trees, make the trees into pulp, into paper, put ink on it, and assign a denominal value to the paper, right? Then they tell you, listen, this paper is worth X, Y, and Z. If you give me those resources over there, I'll give you this paper. And then you'll be able to buy this, this, and this. And when they get the deal with the people say, oh, that's a good deal. So they let the West dictate to them what this amount is worth of that paper money. And so the West gives them this paper money. They give the West the resources. The West refines the resources, sell it back to them for 5 times what they paid for it. And then if you make the West mad, or Europe or America's mad, you make them mad at you, or you alienate yourself from their policies, then they sanction you, making the paper money that they gave you for your resources worthless. That is a good scheme. That's a con artist. That's a magician, right? What they call that sleight of hand. How the magician plays the sleight of hand routine to make you believe something. And when you think you believe it, when you think the ball is under this cup, he's already removed that ball and moved it over there. You're just looking with expectations. Man, I just gave him $5. I saw him put the ball under that cup. He's going to give me $30 because I saw it. I'm finna tell you which cup it is. And when you lift up the cup, you're surprised that there's no ball there. That's sleight of hand, magic, magicians, right? Oh, let me bring Rashid. I know he's dying to come in, so I'm gonna bring him back in and let him speak. Go ahead.
Brother, it's not in the other cup, it's in his hand. He's that good of a con artist that you can't see him. He didn't took it off the playing field and it's in his hand, so you never get it. Where's it at? Pick which one.
Yeah, and you still thinking it's on the table, and he has it in his hand or in his pocket.
He has it in his hand or in his pocket. That is the nature of white people. I mean,
that's the sleight of hand routine that they use in their policies.
If you study what Elijah Muhammad taught the world, this is the nature of these people. They can't change themselves. That they came on the scene doing the same thing. Tricks and lies. That's all that is. Tricks and lies.
Mm-hmm.
You talking about over the so this is why they so mad at China. China. Once China comes or the East comes into power, then she can't pull that game off. The 3-card Molly won't work with the Chinese because they got everything themselves. I don't even have to play the game with you, right?
Right.
You ain't gonna even put they come on. You're not gonna even get up there and play the game with you because everything is in his favor, which is true. Why should I play your games when I'm winning?
Mm-hmm.
I manufacture everything for the planet Earth. Basically, my people are in unison. If I tell a billion people to go stay in the house and don't come out, they're gonna do it. You ain't gonna have half of them with shotguns running around talking about my rights, this is my constitutional right. They gonna do it. They do what they and if you got that many people working together, it's a wheel that can't be stopped. And then the world sees their model, and the little bitty countries of Vietnam, Singapore, Thailand, they look up and say, "That's working." Mm-hmm. Then why should we go back to your policies where you come in and dominate everything, rip off, steal, rob, and give us a little bit of some paper when they gonna give me some gold? Mm-hmm. It's a what did Xi Jinping say? Win-win. Mm-hmm. This is what the American company, the establishment or the empire is very angry with China. They are replacing the rules-based order. Whose rules? Our rules. NATO, this what do you call it? This UN. The rest of the countries of the world need to take that trash and flush it down the commode. It benefits them. It don't benefit you. Mm-hmm. Elijah Muhammad was so wise that he got the dead man of the planet, the so-called American Negro. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, if you take this word Negro and go to its root, you have to go to Greece. Neko. It's for dead. It's the black nation is not no Negro. That's for dead man. That's what the message said he's talking about. Elijah Muhammad's wisdom is so profound that he got the one man that the white man called a dead man to be able to see these things. If you can raise a dead man to life, you gotta have some powerful truths behind that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so as we talk about this, and as we show you and we prove to you that the American establishment, I'm talking about from the higher ups all the way down, is inherently racist. Every level of institution and power in America was built upon the back of the slaughter of indigenous people and the slaughter of the Aboriginal man or the black person of the earth. Now, that cannot be not denied. And when we bring this up and we say, listen, you have to look at these things because every cause brings about an effect. And so they try to push this out, but don't let it be 9/11. They want you to remember forever. Don't let it be the Civil War. They want you to remember forever. Don't let it be the so-called Revolutionary War. These are wars. And they want you to remember.
The white man is still talking about remember the Alamo.
But
right?
when we're talking, that's right. And when we're talking about the situation that we were in, that was back then. No, there has according to science. I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about science. They says that the environment of a person can shape them just as much as DNA. So if you breed people and you rob them constantly and you put fear in them and you brutalize them, and then you do this for decades and for not for just decades but for centuries, right? And then you look out on your in your neighborhood and you see these same people who are descendants from those people. You see them out there with guns shooting at each other. You don't look at them as insane. You have to look at the core. Go back to the root of it. The only way, like when doctors take a patient and the patient says, I have a headache, the doctor just don't look at the headache. The doctor tries to come in and try to find out the cause of the headache, because the cause could be something greater and could be affecting other parts of that patient. But if the doctor were to just look at the headache and say, oh, here's an aspirin, now go, and that person could die as soon as they leave the hospital or as soon as they walk out the room. The doctor
so you got to get at the root of the cause. You got to get
at the root to the very root. And this is what the politicians refuse to do. This is what society refuses to do. And this is what I remember having a debate with Jim Fetzer, the co-founder of 911 Truth Movement, and I have a lot of interviews with him on the Patreon. And we were talking about this very issue, and he could not understand why. And he was talking about statistics. And I said, now, as we look at those statistics, you have to now look into why these events are happening. Why are these people arrested at an alarming rate? Then you have to look at the racist policies that were used and that are used. Because if it was just black people commit more rape, then if you go to Russia has a small population of black, only a few every now and then. But yet crime is still being committed. They don't want to go to the very hardcore issue. A lot of people, they just want to surface dwell because the core issue is something that is not palatable for the establishment, for some of the scholars, for some of the historical writers. And this is something that we have to get to now. As Brother Rashid was talking about China, and we were bringing about the arrogance of the U.S. and how the U.S. blames others and how the U.S. threatens others. They can't see that having 800 bases or official bases, but I remember once during a congressional hearing, and I cannot find this anywhere. I have to look through the site because I remember I put it on the site. But I've Googled it, and they scrubbed it out of the search engine. But I remember watching this, and then I looked it up myself on Google. So I know it happened. And the generals were having a congressional hearing, and they let slip something when they were talking about America's bases and her institutions in other lands. And they said that the U.S. has roughly over 5,000 when you put in all of the so-called training and logistics spots and stuff, over 5,000 bases around the world. The public thinks it's 800, but even 800 is too much. And I want you to understand, think about this. See, I want to point out hypocrisy. If Americans, all right, get a whiff that a foreign military is training in America, they are protesting. They say, oh, that's violating the sovereignty of America. But they have no problem with America having bases on other people's soil. They have no problem with European nations having bases on other people's soil, right? Like, think of what Arabia should have done. I know they're stooges, Saudi Arabia, the Saudis are stooges to the West, and they were put in power by Britain, France, and America. Let us not forget that. But what America has a base, what is it, 40 miles from Mecca, 30 miles from something like that. from the holy city of Mecca, right? What the Arabians should have done is say, okay, if you want this base here, then let us put a base 30 miles from Rome. Let us put a base 30 miles from Rome. Or let us have a base 20 miles from Washington, D.C. and see how that would have gone over. And you would have known that this would have not been acceptable because of the arrogance of a day. Oh, it's okay for me to have bases across the globe because I am this Western Christian nation.
I
But
am
it
the
is
exceptional one, remember.
I was just getting ready to say that. You took the words out of my mouth. I was just getting ready to say that. I am so exceptional that you do as I say, but not as I do. Now, I want you to listen to this clip by General King, a King, that's Keane, right? This clip is courtesy of Fox News. I call it fixed news. But in this, he's talking about China and how China is seeking to dominate, right? He's not concerned with America dominating the globe. He's not concerned with NATO dominating the world. His problem is with China seeking to dominate and not just dominate. He's talking about dominate China's neighborhood. He's talking about China's trying to dominate the South China Sea and stuff like that. He has a problem with that. But he has no problem with America sending warships to the South China Sea, to China's shores. I mean, the arrogance. The reason I'm pointing this out is because nobody sits down and look at this. It's like you're just blind. Like you can't process this stuff. It's like you have been indoctrinated and inundated with the view of American exceptionalism, and it keeps you from being able to see the world as it is and not the way that America presents it to you. But I want you to pay close attention. I'm gonna play the disclaimer again, then I'm gonna play General King. I want you to just see it.
Well, joining me now to discuss all this is retired General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst. General, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, delighted to be here, Jerry.
So everybody's focused on China, obviously, the rising power in Asia, the rising challenge in the world to the United States. How great is the risk, do you think, of an all-out confrontation with them?
Well, I think in the near term, that's probably quite moderate. But the fact is that President Xi is different than all of his predecessors, to include Mao Zedong. And by that I mean he's the most aggressive, the most ambitious, and fundamentally as maligned as Mao Zedong was. But he has a global view in terms of replacing the United States as a world power, and also wants to dominate and control the Indo-Pacific region. And he's seeking that by dominating economically, technologically, militarily, and geopolitically. That is what he is about. And I actually believe that he's actually increased his aggressiveness since the Biden administration has come in. And by that I mean he's had, listen, Jerry, just a few weeks ago he had 250 maritime militia ships in the South China Sea as fishing vessels. They're all militarized by their military, denying the countries in the region access to those international fishing rights. And he is aggravating and intimidating Taiwan much more so. 2020 was the worst year. The first few months now, they've increased rather significantly in all the violations of their air defense zones, as much as 20+ aircraft at one time doing it. Why is he doing that? I think the message is clear. He wants to send a message to our allies in the region. He knows President Biden is trying to put our arms around our allies like President Trump did, but he wants to send a message to them that, look, nothing's changed here. This administration is not going to be able to protect you. And that is what the message he's sending to him. And by the way, he's the first economy to recover from the pandemic, and he knows full well that in the Indo-Pacific region, militarily, he outguns us and he outmans us. There are qualitative differences, to be sure.
So, General,
but those are absolute facts.
And so, General, realistically, as you say, Taiwan seems to be the likely flashpoint. There are many, but this seems to be the most likely. China is, it's in China's backyard, literally. They have enormous military capabilities there, as they've been flexing their muscles and demonstrating over the last few weeks. What realistically can the United States really do to deter China, to deter Beijing from going all out and retaking Taiwan?
Yeah, well, it's not that complicated. To build effective deterrence militarily, you have to have, one, the capability. Your adversary's got to see it as being real, and it's going to impose cost on that adversary by taking action. And two, that adversary's got to believe that you're going to use it. I believe during the Obama administration, they didn't believe, one, the capability wasn't as good as it should be, and two, they didn't think they would use it. So that's most important. But what we must do immediately with a sense of urgency is move more capability into the region to defend our bases in the region with military defense systems, long-range missile systems that can reach the Chinese systems that they have on their coast. And those long-range missiles that the Chinese have reach all of our bases in the region, in the Western Pacific, and can take down our carrier battle groups as well. All of our military knows this. We've played war games. This is capability we have right now. Move it into the region. Let them see it. Increase our capability. And then bring on the advanced weapon systems that we need rather quickly to give us at least a match to their technological advantages that they have.
General Jakim, we've got to wrap it there. Unfortunately, I'd love to talk more about it, but thanks very much.
So this general said a lot of things. It's a lot to unpack here. The first thing he was talking about is China being aggressive, but he is talking about supplanting the U.S. That's the main problem. It's not if China aggressiveness. He understands that the United States is no match for the Chinese military in Asia. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us and teaches us that when this Asian war takes place, that the Chinese will defeat America in this war, and they will run over Australia too. Now look who's getting involved in this situation, Australia, right? So we see all of the pieces starting to take place, get into position. He also talked about China can reach all of their bases. Now, he has no problem with America having military bases all in Asia, but he has a problem with China putting missiles in Chinese territory along the Chinese coast. Do you see the arrogance in that? And then on top of that, he understands that he said this, and this is key. The military planners all have done this. They have war gamed these scenarios, and they understand that they will lose to China because China has the technological list that's majored it, the technological edge, and they outman them and outgun them. This is something that just went over the head of everybody, and they're still talking about the U.S. can do this. But you heard General King, who is a hawk, and he understands that they have war. That's right. He loves it. He loves it. And he wants America to dominate the globe. And the problem that they have with China is that they can't cower them. They cannot dominate them. And this angers and enrages the American empire because they have had their way with nations around the globe for so long. And now that a peer or rival has arrived, militarily, economically, because you can sanction China. Look what happened. Trump went on a sanction fiasco, a thing, right? And the blowback effect was felt in America, not in China, but America.
Trump come to find out that instead of curtailing China's rise, it increased.
That's right. That's right. And then Trump goes and tries to use financial tools against China. And then China, it blew back. China instituted policies, and these policies that Trump instituted wind up hurting the average American, and they started paying the tariffs for the Chinese. So this is enraging. They don't know how to deal with this because the Western or the white world or America has dominated the global scene for so long. And if you've been the bully on the block so long, and everybody has,
that's all you know how to do is be the bully.
That's all you know how to do. And so you resort when you can't get your way. Like it's almost like a child. When the child is used to getting this way and getting what it wants when it wants, and one day the parent or somebody comes and say, "Listen, I'm babysitting your child. They want this. I'm not giving it to them." And the child would pitch a fit, a tantrum, because they're not getting what they want when they want, because they've been accustomed to having it, like Burger King say, your way. Right? And they can no longer get it their way. And this is causing anger to rise up. And I want to play something else to follow this up, okay? I played this clip before on another show, but I'm going to play this clip to show you this, and this is an old clip from last year. But I want you to show you what Rashid and I were saying on the last show about China's Navy and China's Air Force and China's Army and how it has grown. And I want to put it in perspective, because a lot of times people don't put these things in perspective. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, China was one of the poorest, I think either number one or the number two poorest country in the world. They were considered a land power. America would not be. Go ahead.
They had wooden ships.
Yeah. Hey, they had no naval forces that could contend with anybody. So, and now
even Vietnam could whoop them.
Right. And so now we fast forward it 40, 50 years into the future. And look at the rise of China. They said even the U.S. war planners are saying they have never, ever seen such a huge leap in economics and finance and technology and military prowess in the history. They have never seen it. But I want you to listen to this right here about the navies right here.
China now has more warships than the United States Navy. The People's Liberation Army Navy, informally known as the Chinese Navy, recently hit a landmark number of 300 ships, 13 more than the U.S. Navy. Although admittedly imposing, the number doesn't tell the whole story. America's fleet is much larger on a ship-by-ship basis, including 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and an almost equal number of amphibious assault ships. The Center for Strategic and International Studies China Power Project has uploaded an analysis of the People's Liberation Army Navy versus the navies of several other regional countries and major powers. At 300 warship hulls, the People's Liberation Army is the largest navy in the world, counting aircraft.
Boom, right there. Now, he said, I want you to understand, when you listen to things like this, America, they will, because they're losing, they're not going to give you the straight truth. They're going to make it seem as though America still holds an edge. But you just heard what General King, who is a war hawk, just say, that China has the technological edge. Not only are they outmanned, but they're outgunned against China. So also, the first part, go ahead, say what you say.
Also, China's military is modern. They ain't got no ships from the 50s. All of this stuff is technologically up to date. They ain't sending out no frigate from the 1960s out there.
Yeah. So with that said, I'm going to play this clip too, and so I want you to hear what is being discussed in the realms of politics and geopolitics, because you're not getting this stuff, and most people are trying to hide this stuff. And if you don't understand this, you can't prepare for what's coming. The main thing I want you to understand is the time in which we're in, the time and what must be done, what you must do, because things are rapidly changing, and we're going to be, before you know it, the world that you know, you will soon know no more, because we're at the end of it. We're at the end, and I want you to listen to what these pundits are saying about China and what China has to say about the United States. Remember, we talked on the race issue. We brought that into the economic sphere, and we're bringing it into the military sphere, and we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep circling in and circling out so that you can understand that all of these things are connected. They have connecting points. You don't have one without the other. They are all intertwined. So don't try to separate them, because if you separate, you can't see the whole picture. So I want you to pay close attention to this.
Portable TV. Come watch with me. Earlier this week, we reported that the U.S. has recruited Australia, the French, and Japan in joint military exercises. Why? As a show of strength against China. Well, today, China is firing back with some tough words. A Chinese government news outlet has put out an editorial blasting the maneuvers and saying that the U.S. would be defeated if any conflict were to break out in the South China Sea. Here's RT correspondent Alex Mihailovich with the story.
The West is flexing its muscle, and China is not impressed. The so-called joint military exercises by these countries, frankly speaking, has no impact on China at all. They're just burning a little more oil for themselves.
In a first ever, Japan is being joined by Australia, France, and the U.S. in military exercises in the southwestern part of that country. The drills include fighter jets and amphibious operation exercises, as well as naval maneuvering. Many believe that the activity in Japan is a show of force aimed at China, as Japan works towards expanding and consolidating military alliances in an effort to deter the neighboring superpower. However, it seems that the drills may have been counterproductive in some respects, irritating China instead of working to contain it. According to an editorial in China's Global Times newspaper, the United States will be defeated if it engages in combat with China in its neighboring waters. Another article in China's Global Times said, the People's Liberation Army doesn't even need to make pointed responses to the joint drill since it's insignificant militarily. PLA should make concrete steps in its own development, like it did with recent drills and warship commissioning, said analysts. Japan has had long-time territorial concerns in areas of dispute with China. Beijing has made claims to the Japanese-administered Senkaku Islands, and through the years there has been Chinese military activity in the area. That said, China has insisted that it is not a threat to anyone and is merely concerned with its own territorial integrity, citing the Japanese exercises as misplaced energy on behalf of the participating nations.
I hope they will spend such time, energy, and resources more in severing their own people's interests and making more contributions to the current fight against the epidemic at home, as well as international anti-epidemic cooperation.
The Japan drills are a part of an increase in military activity involving the U.S. and its allies in the region. For RT, I'm Alex Mihailovich.
Joining us now is a former UK Member of Parliament, George Galloway, to talk about this a little bit. Boy, it just doesn't seem to stop. Every day, it seems, I wake up and there's another military exercise and another military exercise. And by the way, it goes both ways. Taiwan's doing military exercises. The U.S. is doing military exercises with Taiwan. The U.S. is doing military exercises with Australia. Now they're doing it with Japan and the Philippines. I mean, where does this end?
Well, let's take a leap of imagination. Imagine that the United States had 4 hostile countries. I know it's almost impossible to believe. Imagine America had 4 enemies. And imagine the 4 navies of those 4 enemies turned up off the coast of the United States and conducted drills, say in Cuba. With landings, amphibious landings, a critical mass of warships, firing, missiles, and so on. How would the people of the United States, how would the government of the United States react to that? And you have to walk a mile in the other fellow's shoes in international affairs. And if you try to, you'll understand how irritating this must all be to China. And what a spur it must be to China's own warship development, the commissioning that was just referred to there. If they're not fools, and I don't think they are, they'll be building so many warships right now that no one will dare to steam up the Yangtze or in the East China Sea and threaten them in any way, Rick.
You and I are old, so we know this, but a lot of our viewers don't because they were born after October of 1962. But what you just described in Cuba kind of happened already in 1962. And we came this close, George, to World War III as a result of that, when the shoe, as you say, was on the other foot.
Well, experience is the only good thing about getting old, Rick, and it means that we lived through the periods in which the end of the world, if not nigh, was at least a distinct possibility. I recall going to bed as a child that night in 1962 and thinking that the world might end. And yet now we are cavalierly dispatching huge military assets into someone else's sea, the East China Sea. The clue is in the name. Now, this is all very foolish and dangerous. It would be far better, now that we're cooperating on the climate change issue, if we could turn down the dial rather than turning it up. and getting back to some kind of cooperation.
George Galloway, nobody says it clearer or better. Thank you, my friend.
So the Chinese are not even worried, and the thing about it is they openly and openly said that if any war breaks out, America would be defeated. They're not mixing words. They're not missing words. They're not chopping up words. They say what they have to say, and they leave it like that. America, she has to come with all this pompous, arrogant, brouhaha. We'll do this, such and such. We demand such and such to do this. We demand such and such to do that. They must do this and they must do that, or this, and this. And one thing shows you that China. Hold on one second. One thing shows them that China is in a position that America doesn't like is that recently, a few days ago, Joe Biden, after the summit with Xi Jinping, the president of China, Joe Biden gets home. I mean, well, he's already in the U.S., but Joe Biden says, well, I'm thinking about boycotting the Beijing Winter Olympics. And then Boris, the Prime Minister of the UK follows suit and says the same thing. Yeah, Boris Johnson of the UK says the same thing. And as he says the same thing, the Chinese respond and said, we didn't ask you to come in the first place. And I was weak because their response was, hey, boycott all you want. We didn't ask you to come in the first place. We didn't give you an invitation. So this shows you the how America was perched up here, but now she's falling. She's falling fast. She's falling fast.
It's the turning over from west to east. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. It shows you that she's turning from the west to east, and that the east is going to be dominating power. But going back to what you were saying about China, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, when the Chinese woman came over here in '65,
yes, sir, yeah,
told her that China will defeat America in this war. And now, 60 years later, they're doing the same thing.
They're cutting your mic off. Your mic is going in and out.
They're doing the same thing. It's showing you that she is defeating her. I mean,
yes.
that China is seeing what Elijah Muhammad told them.
Your thing is going in and out.
So said China would do. He also taught us.
Your thing is going in and out. Hold on. We're having technical difficulties with Rashid. I just muted his mic because there's a lot of blowback in my ear, but I'm not hearing him. You may be able to hear him, but it's like a long pause in my microphone, in my ear. So I muted him for a second, hoping that it will clear up. But I looked at the time. Rashid, we've been on here forever. We got to get the people exit. But listen, Rashid and I, we also do a show on Blog Talk Radio. You got to go over there, check it out. It's called the Star and Crescent Report. It's amazing. Been on the air for 12 years. And you can go to the Hiram's 1555 blog. That's Hiram, HIRAM 1555.com. Go there. And then you can go to the Patreon, sign up. You can read free stuff over there, but you can also, for our exclusive interviews, our exclusive articles, and we reveal a lot of stuff before it even comes out in the news, sometimes weeks and months before it, and sometimes it never comes out in the news, so you'll get exclusive content and insight on what's going on in the world. I'm going to cut it short here. Rashid, I'm sorry, man. I got a whole bunch of blowback, and I really appreciate you co-hosting the show with me. I'm going to tell the people, listen, the world is melting down, and the world that you know, you will soon know no more. My advice to you is to acquaint yourself with the same person that I acquainted myself with, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, to get some insight into what the world is expecting to happen. Now, on that note, I'm going to say to you, stay strong, stay true, stay righteous, and I want you to know that if you are on the side of God, I'm on your side and you're on the right side. Mama, I love you. We'll check you out with a full nation salute. I say to you all,